From MTN, the Montana Television Network, this is Face the State.
Good morning. Welcome to Face the State. After Congressman Zinke resigned from his House seat to join the Trump administration, Governor Steve Bullock scheduled a special election for May 25th to select his replacement. The Republican and Democratic parties met in Helena, where each selected their respective nominees. Today, Chief Political Reporter Mike Dennison and I are joined by the Democratic nominee for the House, singer-songwriter Rob Quist, to talk about his race and vision for Montana. Mr. Quist, thanks for joining us today.
It's good to be here. Thank you for having me.
So you were kind of a surprise nominee coming out of Helena, and thinking about the upcoming race. Why do you want to run? Why are you running for this seat, number one? And then secondly, how did that all happen? Who approached you to do this?
Well, you know, that's the question I've always heard. You know, why would you want to throw your hat in the ring for this, and why would you want to subject you and your family to obviously the things that happen in politics? But I guess that you know, I was approached by some people I really respect about considering running for this office, and my first response was, "Well, what do you mean? I'm no politician." And the response was, "Exactly." But then, of course, I had to call some people I really respect, former Governor Schweitzer for one, and they said, "Rob, you know, you really need to consider doing this because, you know, who better than you to represent the people of Montana?" And I realized that, you know, through my music and my poetry and my outreach, you know, for the state of Montana, I really have been representing the people of Montana all my life. And so I guess it really came down to a quote by Ernest Hemingway that our lives are measured by the magnitude of the challenges we accept. And I realized I had to accept this challenge.
I'm just curious, you mentioned your music and you've been a performer for many years, but how does being a songwriter and a musician qualify to be a U.S. representative, I mean, in a professional sense?
You know, to me, I think that there is no better, you know, first of all, to be a musician and a small business owner. I mean, this is one of the toughest businesses that you can be in, especially in the state of Montana. You know, you go through a trial by fire literally every day you step on stage. This involves, you know, organizing sound companies and promotion and, and of course, you know, standing in front of crowds and you know, emoting and bearing your soul in front of people every day. So honestly, I really feel like I've been preparing for this my whole life.
And with all due respect, I don't mean to be dismissive, but you know, John Tester, of course, talks a lot about the common sense that he's learned as a farmer, and that background's really important to him.
Yeah.
But John Tester also served in the state Senate, and he served as Senate President. So what do you know about policy that's going to be useful for this job in Washington? Well,
first of all, you know, I've actually I've served on the Montana Arts Council board for 11 years, which is a microcosm of government. You have your committees that do all the hard work and then take it to the board, you know, to ratify things. And I've also been I was a cultural representative for the Montana Department of Commerce to Kumamoto, Japan for 3 consecutive years. And, you know, but like I say, I've really been in Montana's, first of all, I was, you know, of course, grew up in a Montana farming ranching community for the first 18 years of my life. I've also worked as a road construction person for a summer, and also worked in the oil fields, you know, and then of course through my life in the arts, I've really been in touch with every demographic and every small town and big city in the state many, many times. And I know the stories of the people of Montana, and they know me. So I think, you know, this is the House of Representatives. This is not the Millionaires Club. And so I'm thinking, who better to represent the people of Montana than one of their own?
You mentioned before that you supported Bernie Sanders in the presidential race. I'm just wondering,
yes.
who are some of your other political heroes?
Well, I would have to say probably one of my main political heroes would be Mike Mansfield. Talk about the perfect statesman. I think every congressman should have to take the Mike Mansfield School of Statesmanship course, you know, when running for office. And of course, I also have to admire Pat Williams. Pat is also a friend of mine, but more importantly, he is a hero to those of us that served on the Montana Arts Council because of his work with the National Endowment for the Arts. And he's been a great supporter of mine as well.
Assuming you win, first of all, what are you going to look for in terms of the staff that you hire? And then what are your priorities? What are your 3 top priorities that you would want to take care of when you get to Congress?
You know, first of all, you know, wherever you go in this country, there is always what I lovingly refer to as the Montana Mafia. Even in Nashville, when I was a songwriter, people from Montana were kind of ruling the roost down there, and I think it's kind of the same in Washington, D.C. And so, I think I've already got, some very qualified people stepping forward, to help me put a really good staff together. My priorities would be, of course, public lands. That's one of my top issues. And when I was traveling the state during the primary, when I got to 40 different counties, and I was actually on a listening tour about the concerns that the people of Montana have, and public lands was the issue that came up almost every time as the top issue. That's it. So that's a good one for me. We have to protect our public lands. Due to my touring across the nation, I realized that many states have lost what we still have. And this is really a serious thing that I think Montanans are really concerned about. So that's my top priority. Of course, the economy and the state is always a big one too. Being from the ranching and farming community, I'm really concerned about the fact that our farmers and ranchers are not getting a good price for their grain overseas. And then also I think that, of course, Social Security and Medicare are big issues with me as well.
Now, Democrats haven't held this seat since 1996. And what do they have to offer that Republicans don't in this seat? And you're going to be one of 435 people. You're going to be in the minority. Why wouldn't I vote for a Republican? Well,
first of all, I really feel like I can't answer for the party, but I really feel like I have the best interests of the people of Montana. And I think that's why they're supporting me. Energy for this campaign is like nothing I've ever seen in the state of Montana. Everywhere we go, people are turning out in droves, and they want to get involved, they want to contribute, volunteer, knock on doors, make phone calls. I've never seen the like of it, and so it's been really gratifying to me. It's like this legion that's growing behind me that I really love. But anyway, what was the second part of your question?
Well, I guess what's the contrast between you as a Democrat and Mr. Gianforte as a Republican? If I'm a Montana voter, I'm saying that the Republicans are in the majority. I like a lot of things they say about business development, et cetera. Why should I vote for you, a Democrat?
Well, first of all, of course, I realize when I get there, I would have the lowest seniority of any congressional member, number 435 out of 435. But I think that the way we make a difference is that we form coalitions. I would be working with senators from other Western states that have the same concerns that we do. And I think a good example of that is the public lands rally that happened in the Rotunda, and I'm sure that you were probably there for that. It was one of the largest gatherings inside the Rotunda I've ever seen about our public lands. There were people from all walks of life. There were hunters and outfitters and people who love to hike and kayak, and of course all the groups that are so committed to protecting our public lands. And so, and this happened clear across the West. And I've never seen a bill disappear so quickly from the halls of Congress. So this is how we do this. We form coalitions, and like I say, the reason I really feel like I can contrast myself to my opponent is that I'm one of the people, and he is I think a part of a class that really is not in touch with the people of Montana.
All right, well, you talk about how obviously you're different. You come from very different backgrounds. Fine, let's talk about policy. You mentioned public lands is something that's important to you.
Yes.
And his campaign ads, and the Republicans talk about this a lot, that they say there's a war in the West, that there's a war in the West, and the East doesn't understand the West, and they put all these regulations in place that stifle innovation in public lands and mineral development. Do you agree that there's a war in the West? And if not, why not?
Well, I think that the war in the West is really something that we're talking about two different wars on the West. Quite frankly, pardon me, I really feel like he's part of that war on the West. I mean, first of all, his whole concept of supporting groups that want to transfer our public lands into state ownership, to me that is a smokescreen for the selling off of our public lands, because it's really important that we understand this, because our state does not have the resources to manage these funds, these state lands, and so when that happens, then of course they become sold off to pay for wildfire management and those types of things. So I think that's a smokescreen. I also, I'm very concerned about the fact that he sued the people of Montana to block stream access. So to me, I think that the war of the West that he's talking about, he's part of that war.
So let's go a little bit further on this same point. Secretary of Interior Ryan Zinke, of course, who abandoned the seat in order to take this particular job, he basically just reversed the moratorium on coal leases. Is that something that you support? Do you support that there should be more access to leasing for extraction of coal on federal lands?
Well, first of all, let's just identify that coal is a big driver in our state economy. It's really a major part of our state budget. And so we have to understand that. But at the same time, I really feel like Montana has an opportunity to get out in front of the renewable energies business. And with all of our opportunities for wind and solar, I think that this is where we should be focusing. At the same time, we can't leave our families that are relying on the coal industry behind.
I just want to shift gears a little bit here and talk about some things that have been in the papers and also on our coverage about your past personal debts.
Yes.
First, just to be clear, the debts that you incurred, some property tax liens and lines of credit, those have all been paid off, correct?
Yes, they have.
And also there was some reporting about your lawsuit against the bank in which you talked about not being able to perform, and that's why you didn't have some money, but then you did have a lot of shows in 2011. I'm just wondering, is that a conflict there? Is that an issue of trust that we should be concerned about?
Well, first of all, let's define a lot of shows. I mean, out of 350 days, I wouldn't say that 35 shows are a lot of shows. That's probably 2 or 3 shows a month, and I don't think any Montanan would consider that working a lot. And obviously, we had some problems, just like many Montana families have. We've done our healthcare rallies across the state, and we're hearing story after story about people who are facing the exact same thing that I have and my family. And so this was a perfect storm. I had a botched gallbladder surgery, which started this whole thing. I had to have several reconstructive surgeries through the course of this, and then compounded by the fact that my wife, who's a real estate broker and agent, in the 2008 recession, that kind of had a factor on us too. But as I say, when I go across the state and listen to the people of Montana, these are issues that they're facing too. And I think that they really want someone who has been through the same things that they have to represent them.
And although the suit itself said you couldn't work at all, I'm just wondering if that, when you kind of called into question saying that really wasn't true.
Well, like I say, 2 or 3 days a month, that sure didn't feel like I was working to me.
Okay.
I guess it gets to the fundamental question. When we vote for somebody to represent us in Congress, we have to trust them. We're placing the public trust in them in order to make decisions on our behalf. How can we trust someone who hasn't paid taxes to set tax policy?
Well, like I said, I've paid my tax liens. Everyone, just like my opponent, has paid his tax liens. He's had 22 tax liens against him, and I hope that you have a chance to question him about those as well.
Speaking of taxes, you've spoken fondly of the high marginal rate during the Eisenhower years. 90% it was, and right now that rate is 39%, the top federal income tax rate. What do you think the top rate should be if you could change it right now?
Well, I just know that it's not fair for the middle class. We have a middle class that's been carrying this country for years and years. And to me, we have to give benefits back to the middle class and not allow the super rich to have such a low rate. I think that the exact rate would be something that we would have to look at. And I'm not saying I have all the answers, but I have questions. I have questions why the super rich can have all these tax breaks, but yet the middle class have to carry the weight of funding this country.
Now, if we had more money because of the higher tax rate on top earners, where should that money be spent to help the middle class? What's your general plan or general thoughts about that?
Well, first of all, we can't cut Social Security and Medicare. I think that these people have paid into it all their whole lives, and so we cannot take this away. And I think we need to give tax breaks to small businesses rather than corporations that are sending their outsourcing jobs overseas. To give tax breaks to groups like that, to me, that's unpatriotic.
What about the argument that Republicans will make, and your opponent Gianforte will likely make, that raising the highest marginal tax rate to something like 90% or whatever it is stifles innovation and actually cuts back on job creation? That if you cut the wealthiest, it hurts the job creation, it helps the middle class. Well,
this is the point I was trying to make about what Eisenhower did. Because that high rate, instead of having people pile up all their money and then since that was being taxed, then they would reinvest it in growing businesses and infrastructure because they were forced to do that rather than being taxed at that higher rate. That was the point I was trying to make, and I think that's the solution too.
So one thing you've talked about on the campaign trail, and this actually relates to your situation with the gallbladder, is that you've talked about that we need to have essentially health care for everyone in the United States. So what would that look like? Are we talking like Medicare for everybody? Are we talking about the National Health Service like they have in the United Kingdom? What would that idea look like moving forward?
Well, first of all, and this relates to my issues as well, I think one of the things that happened with me that bailed our family out is that I took Social Security and Medicare early, much earlier than I wanted to, because I wanted to wait until the full term had gone so I could have gotten the full benefits. But this bailed me and my family out. But this is not a situation that regular Montanans have. And so, Medicare is a great system. You walk in, you show your card, and you're covered, no questions asked. But right now, I think that the issue is that we have to strengthen, not repeal the ACA. If we repeal the ACA, then there's 73,000 Montanans that are covered by the HELP Act, and also 24 million Americans, nationwide would be dropped from this. And I think that this other health care plan, the HCA, that my opponent is and his people are backing, would be disastrous for the American people.
But you have spoken of a single payer system as something you admire, which is essentially Medicare for all, correct?
Yes.
Yes. And but that's really not realistic in our current political climate, is it?
Well, it's going to take some time to get there. But I will say this, that our health care, we are spending more for our health care than any country in the world, and yet we are rated number 37. And I think that the wrong people are at the table making the decisions about our health care. We have to have representatives of the American people and not the pharmaceutical companies and the insurance companies at the table making decisions on the health care that we have.
Now, you mentioned your support for the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, whatever you want to call it. Is there anything you'd like to change about that you think could be improved?
Well, I think one of the things that we can really look at is to bring down health care costs would be the pharmaceutical costs. I have a personal story on that myself. My wife Bonnie is allergic to bee stings, and I almost lost her a few years ago. But on the backside of this, to have her carry an EpiPen is $500. Her family in Canada can get the same EpiPen for $20. Now, does this sound like a system that puts people before profits? I don't think so.
So basically, moving potentially towards a single payer system. But one of the biggest problems with the ACAs that exist is that we're not getting the people we need to sign up. We've had a lot of sicker people sign up, and that's good that they're getting coverage, but we're not getting a lot of the younger people sign up. And some people argue that the biggest reason why is that the penalty is so low. Would you support, for example, raising the penalty for not getting health care to encourage more young people into the system to spread out the risks across a larger pool?
Well, to me, that's, it's I don't know, that seems like a wrong approach on it, penalizing people for not, because many people are struggling just to make ends meet. I mean, the economy, of course, not only in Montana and the nation is really in tough shape, and I think that's almost the wrong approach, and I think that's why we would need to move to a more of a Medicare for all, and quite frankly, these are systems that work really well in other countries. There's a family that I met from Denmark, and they are very happy with their health care system. And they were, quite frankly, very worried as they traveled the United States about what would happen if something happened medically to them. What would they do? And so, I think that we have to have creative ways and not penalize the people even more than they are being penalized.
Now, Donald Trump, as you know, won Montana last year by about 20 points. Yeah. Mr. Gianforte, your main opponent, has embraced Trump and said we need to carry out the Trump agenda, and the Democrats in Congress are dedicated to opposing it. How do you answer that criticism when they say, okay, we're just electing a guy who's going to oppose Donald Trump? Why should we do that? Well,
the thing is that I have stated many times that there are many things that President Trump is proposing that I would support that will benefit the people of Montana. But there are many things that I would oppose as well.
And what are some of those things that you would support or oppose?
Well, I think that his idea of helping working families is something I would support, and I think that we also need to reduce the dark money that gets into our elections. That's something that we really need to look at, and plus focusing on infrastructure and manufacturing. Those, and also I think fair trade deals for our Montana farmers and ranchers. Those are things that I would support.
So which trade deals that are in place would you want to see adjustments to? Do you think NAFTA needs to be adjusted? Do you support the trade deals with the Pacific and the Colombian trade deals? I mean, which ones do you think need to be looked at? Which ones do you support?
Well, I think that the Trans-Pacific Partnership will benefit farmers and ranchers, but at the same time, it will hurt American workers. So, and I think now that that the TPP hasn't really been implemented, so it's really not going to change things. I think now we really need to focus on getting bilateral trade agreements for our farmers. Last year, my family still has farms, my sister and her husband, up in North Glacier County. Last year they had one of the best years that they've ever had, but due to the, the low price of grain, that they were not able to take advantage of that. Montana farmers, they send out 80% of their grain overseas, and we have the best quality grains in the world, and we have the highest production. But at the same time, we have to have good trade agreements, so that they can sell this grain overseas.
Do you support the tough policy that Trump is pursuing against Mexico vis-a-vis NAFTA?
Well, I think that first of all, his whole policy of building this wall, to me, I have deep concerns about that because, I understand that we have to secure our borders, but at the same time, the cost of this wall is something that we cannot put on the backs of our children and our grandchildren.
In some of the TV ads that have criticized you, they allege that you support a gun registry. And I'm just wondering, and you've said a few things in the past that could be interpreted that way. What's your position on that? What's the accurate description of how you feel about a gun registry or just the Second Amendment and gun ownership in general?
Well, first of all, that was taken totally out of context, And I can say that any ads that any newspaper articles that have been done about me, I can always, out of any article, I could pick two things that are false, because, it's just that's just the nature of the game. But first of all, I come from a ranching and farming community, and gun safety is a way of life, and that's something I grew up with, and it's a time-honored tradition amongst the people in my my family to bring meat home to the table, and I've done that many times. And I will say this, that I've got guns that are much older than the number of years that Greg Gianforte has been in the state. But I support Second Amendment rights, and I think that the laws that we have in this state are fine for the state of Montana.
Well, but how do you feel about, for instance, background checks on guns that are sold at gun shows, which doesn't happen right now? Is that something you would support or not?
Well, I think that I would really need to listen to the people of Montana. The thing that's important to realize here is that I am the servant of the people of Montana when I take this position, and so I will need to listen to the people of Montana, and they will be the guide, I will be the servant.
Well, John Tester supported Mansion Toomey, which essentially closed that gun show loophole. So would you support John Tester on that on a Mansion Toomey type fix?
On the Mansion Toomey
fix that was discussed.
Well, that's one thing I'd have to examine because I haven't had a chance to examine that particular statute. So,
all right. Well, let's pivot again and talk about some recent news events. So, North Korea is in the news. They had a recent missile launch, and some people say that they could have an intercontinental ballistic missile within the next 5 years that could reach the West Coast. What's your general view of the U.S. and world affairs, and should we take a tough stand against North Korea?
Well, I think that this is something that we have to sit down with our allies and come up with a comprehensive plan on how to deal with situations like this. Obviously, security of the nation is got to be a top priority for any congressman, and so this is something that I will definitely take a look at. And to make statements as to what we would or would do right now is pure speculation, and we really can't do that. But I think that I think every option should be on the table.
The Trump administration has indicated that they're willing to go after North Korea regardless of what China wants to do. Is that a good idea?
Well, that's the thing. Is that it's really important that we make measured responses. I think that we cannot have a knee-jerk reaction to any situation that happens worldwide. We've seen how America has gotten itself into situations where it's taken years and years to get out of. So I think that to me, you should always exercise good judgment.
Now, the president is also calling for a big increase in military spending. And I'm just wondering, where are you on that? Do we need to spend a lot more money on our military or not? Or do we need to spend less money? What's your position? Well,
to me, I think that, that we really need to focus on helping our own citizens. To me, that's the important thing. I really feel like, the money we spend, should be really to help our citizenry right now. As I said before, the middle class is carrying so much of the load, and to have them carry a deeper load, for some of these things overseas. I think the main thing that I'm concerned about is that, I really want to stand up for our veterans who are coming back from these wars. My friends in the healthcare industry tell me that we are just seeing the tip of the iceberg. We have veterans that are coming back that are broken individuals and are having a rough time reintegrating. One of the committees I want to serve on when I first get there would be the Veterans Affairs Committee to help these veterans reintegrate into life. And so I think that's where we need to be focusing.
But in terms of overall military spending, it sounds like you're saying that you don't want to spend a lot more money outside the country on military bases or expansions or what?
Well, you know, that's the thing, is that I really feel like, you know, I've never advocated for cutting the budget. That is patently false. And once again, these are what I like to call weapons of mass distraction, you know, untruths about where I stand. You know, I think that we need to support our military, but I think that, you know, as I said, you know, focusing more on the people of this country is more important.
Is it appropriate to ask our NATO allies to make good on that 2% of their GDP commitment to spend on the military, and if they don't make good in that commitment, we shouldn't defend them?
Well, you know, I think that once again, this is something that, you know, I really I think that needs to be looked at in more detail. There are other things that are the factors rather than just, you know, I don't think you can make a blanket statement on just that one thing. There are other factors such as economic considerations as well. So that's how I feel.
Getting toward the end of our show, you mentioned special interests on the campaign trail a lot and how you're going to battle the special interests and to distort the will of the people. I asked my students, what exactly is a special interest in your mind, and why aren't your interests special?
Well, first of all, we've seen that special interests have really, you know, just look at this campaign. There is a congressional leadership, pardon me, there is a congressional leadership fund that is spending $700,000 in attack ads against me. And we have seen that they're controlling Washington, D.C. very, very much in this. And now we're starting to see this leak into the political landscape here in Montana. You know, I have to applaud Governor Bullock and his commitment to transparency in our elections. And so I think that this really sums up, you know, this whole election. Are we going to let outside forces buy this election, or are we going to have someone who stands up for the people of Montana? So to me, this is the real crux of this election.
One last quick question. You say you're not the underdog in this race, but I'm guessing you've seen internal polling that shows that you might be the underdog in this race. I'm just wondering, how are you going to reach out to people, reach enough people out there, convince them to vote for you in these final 6 or 7 weeks?
Yeah, you got about 30 seconds.
Well, you know, I think that first of all, you have to realize that my opponent's numbers, negative numbers, are huge. My negative numbers are tiny. And so there's still a lot of people that really don't know me. And so that's why I've been, you know, getting out to the entire state, making personal connections. And so I really feel like there's a groundswell of support behind me. I'm feeling really good about where we're at. So
maybe one tiny last question. Where are you going to next? Next week, where are you going to be?
Well, next week I'm going to be concentrating on hitting the reservations and, you know, and reaching out to my Native American friends.
Well, I'll tell you, a lot of people that I've talked to get upset about campaign season and all the advertisements and TV ads that come about. I'm going to tell you, I love it. I think it's great and it's fantastic, and I'm only sad that I'm going to be out of the country when the election occurs. But let me remind all the viewers here, this election is important. It's on a Thursday. That's unusual. It's on May 25th.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So first of all, make sure that you vote. If you're not registered, get out and do it. Get a ballot. This is important. This is one of the few times where we have a chance, an open seat for the House. So we'll see you then. Thanks for joining us on Face the State.
You've been watching Face the State, a presentation of MTN, the Montana Television Network.